Well, hey, good morning, friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel and also welcome to my Tuesday Live. When I'm going live here, I'm usually doing that for my membership, but today I'm going public, and so if you're new here, I'm Jill Williams. I'm a watercolorist and instructor, so welcome, and I invite you to, browse around the channel a little bit. I do have some instructional content here, and I'm going to start adding a little bit more here. I have usually been working over on Facebook and that type of thing, and then just even privately on my website, but I'm trying to bring out a little bit more information and instructional content out here on YouTube. So I've got a growing audience, and so I just welcome you all here. Appreciate you coming in. So what I want to do today is actually share a lesson with you that I'm sharing with my membership today. And what I'm going to be talking about is using charcoal. And, if you've been painting or drawing for any amount of time, you're probably familiar with charcoal. You've probably used it, and especially if you've come through some drawing training or professional training, sort of coming through an academic route in learning your craft, charcoal is one of the very first things that you begin to work with. And I think the main reason that's the case is it's one of the oldest mediums. It's very easy to use. It's very accessible, and one of the great things about charcoal is that you can get a really wide range of values very easily, and so it really is a helpful tool when you're first starting to learn to sketch and draw. And also those values are really important once you are ready to start moving into painting. So when we're talking about drawing, it's very important to realize that while you might not have a lot of drawing experience, drawing is really important to your painting process. And that is one of the big things I'm going to be talking about with my membership over the whole month of September. And so today is just kind of a lead-off lesson where we're going to kind of jump into charcoal a little bit. I'm going to show you some different things that I have here with me, some different ways that I use charcoal, some different things that you can do with it. And I'm actually going to do a little demo, and you've got access, once the video is over, there is a little photo that you can download to do the drawing yourself. And I've also got a couple little worksheets that you can use to practice over the week. So hopefully there'll be some good things here for you that you'll enjoy, and you'll come away learning something brand new. So I'm going to look over here. I've got some folks coming in. Jill's here. Good morning. Woodland Homestead, good morning. I know you're there. So glad to see you. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn over to my work area, and let's kind of get started. I'm going to show you some of the different things that I've got here on hand. So when we're talking about charcoal, one of the most common things that people think of are just the charcoal pencil and also vine charcoal. Okay, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm using here. So we've all probably seen these in the art store, and you probably have even used them. And these are the two most common ones. And the little charcoal, if you want to really even think about charcoal, the little sticks that you find, these are not really fabricated. These are actually little sticks that have been burned, but not all the way to ash, to form, the charcoal that we use. And so this is kind of charcoal in its raw form. And then, then we've got the charcoal that has been sort of processed and compressed into a little stem that gets, inserted into a pencil casing. And, we still get kind of the same thing when we're working. So these are the things that probably everybody's a little bit familiar with. And, when you're working with charcoal, having a good eraser is really important, and the Kneaded Eraser is usually the eraser that gets used. It's very, very good at lifting. It's very sticky, and really, it'll pick up the charcoal right away and lift that off of your paper while you're working. So, this little ensemble right here is probably what everybody is most familiar with. So let me just show you a couple of other things that I've got here. So we talked about the little willow sticks, being sort of a raw form of charcoal, and you can buy these, by the box. You can get as many of these as you want. I've got a couple of little sticks here, and of course they're in different sizes because they're just different little whatever the sticks were, that's the stick that you get, you know, after it has been processed, after it has been charred. But, you know, you can actually go just, you know, into your fireplace or a campfire, and everybody has seen these leftover little chunks of burned wood, you know, at the end of a fire. Well, this is charcoal, and so you can actually, you know, this is what was really used since ancient times. You know, is actually, you know, getting charred wood, and see, it makes marks just like, you know, just like your pencils. It's the exact same thing. And so you can take, you know, even bits like this of your own and do a lot of different things with this. You can draw with them. It is kind of hard to draw with sometimes, obviously, because of the irregular shape and that type of thing. But one of the things that you can do with, you know, big chunks of charcoal like this is to actually grind it up into a powder. And I will actually use like a mortar and pestle to grind up the powder, you know, grind up the charcoal, and you can actually see it in there. I'm just using a dry paintbrush to sort of lift it up, but you can see, you know, the charcoal is in there, and I can use that charcoal with a paintbrush and come into a drawing and, you know, actually just use the paintbrush to kind of move it around, just a dry brush. Kind of has that same effect as if you had, you know, taken your finger and sort of did some, you know, a little bit of smearing, you know, that type of thing. So that's something that you can also do with charcoal, is to grind it up. And if you like using it that way, you don't actually have to grind it up. You can just purchase it already ground. In fact, I've got a big bottle of it here, and it's the same thing. You know, this has been commercially processed, but it's still the same thing, just the charcoal powder. And this one, it's a little bit darker, it's more refined, it has a finer grind. You know, it's been, you know, put through a machine, however it is that they process this, but you can see you do get a much darker value with the, you know, with the kind that you buy. This has actually been produced by a company called Generals, and if you've bought any charcoal at any point in time in the last 3 decades, you're going to be familiar with Generals. In fact, here's one of their little kits. Highly recommend this if you're new to charcoal. Just go to your hobby store, or you can even get these on Amazon too, but just get one of their charcoal kits. This one right here, the number 15 charcoal kit, is especially good. There are some pieces missing out of it at the moment because I've used them for different things, but you have several different charcoal pencils that are varying degrees of darkness. You actually have some compressed charcoal sticks that are, you know, pretty much the same thing as all the charcoal. It's been compressed into a powder or ground into a powder, and then they actually compress it into a stick. So it's still going to make those same charcoal marks, but you've got a little bit more control and can kind of handle it almost like a pastel stick. A lot of different options there with the kit. And the kits usually come with, you know, a kneaded eraser. They look like this when they're brand new. They look like like a piece of gum, I guess. Got some more folks coming in. Good morning. Yes, it's raining here too. It's raining pretty loud too, so I hope that it's not covering up, getting into the broadcast here too much. But so when you're using charcoal, one of the great things about it is it is so easy to use, and you can get these really dark values really quickly. It's very easy to manipulate. You can put your fingers in it. You can get your pencils out. You can add marks to it. You can just kind of, you know, almost like, you know, it is just like drawing with pencil. And you can come in here and do some shading. You have little tools like this. This is a blending stump, so that, you know, your fingers are a little bit too big to blend into some tight corners sometimes, but you can use a little blending tool like this to, you know, kind of load it up with a little bit of charcoal, and then get into really tight areas that maybe otherwise you would not be able to with your fingertips. So you've got a lot of different things that you can do that you don't get to do with pencil, because the charcoal is so dynamic. It is so, you know, there's so many different stages of it. You know, you've got powdered forms, you've got stick forms, you've got compressed forms. There's a lot of different things that you do with it. And I use the kneaded eraser primarily for lifting, like I had mentioned earlier. You see it does a really nice job with taking taking the charcoal off the paper. And here's another favorite eraser when using charcoal. It's the Prismacolor makes these now, but it's called Magic Rub Eraser, and it's just a nice rubbery kind of latex feeling sort of eraser, but it really has nice edges to really come in, and it can really lift up even darker areas where sometimes the kneaded eraser might not lift as well once you get some really heavy concentration of the charcoal, but this Magic Rub really does a nice job of lifting out where the kneaded eraser kind of fails to do so. I'm going to show you one more thing that I use with my charcoal, and then I'm going to actually start a demo. This is called a pounce, and this has been around for many generations and generations of artists, and I have actually taken just an old piece of t-shirt fabric and filled it up with some of my my powdered charcoal, and just sort of formed twisted the fabric around to make sure that all of my powdered charcoal was contained inside this little section right here, and then just tied it off. And what this allows me to do is to come into my work, and I can just easily shade and add some value in some places without really having to get anything out. To sprinkle fresh, charcoal in an area, and it's really good for toning large areas smoothly so that you don't have any, any marks. You can also use it just for blending. I can come back into an area where I've been working and start moving that material around, to just kind of just move the material around quickly without, getting my hands completely covered in charcoal. This is a really handy tool, and for my members that are out there, I'm going to show you how to make these in one of our later sessions this month. But so with that in mind, let's go ahead and just kind of take a look at starting with a little simple sketch in charcoal today. And I have posted, you'll have access to it, but I've got a little photo of just a simple black and white photo of an apple that gives us a chance to sort of work with some values here. A lot of high contrast, very simple, just something easy to work with. And I would encourage you, that when you start working with charcoal, and especially if you haven't worked with it before, just start with something very simple, just some basic shapes to kind of familiarize yourself with the medium. You start to learn how it behaves a little bit, and really just enjoy it, have fun with it. And it's okay to just make mistakes, make a mess, all that good stuff, just sort of figure out what it does. But a really good way to do that is just start with something really simple. And in fact, I'll show you this. You'll have access to this after the video, but I've got a little worksheet that I'm going to share with you, at the end. This is just like a little classroom sort of, just a little classroom worksheet, but you'll have access to this where you can kind of go in and just work with some really simple shapes, just to play with the charcoal, play with it, and sort of, kind of mess around with it, and learn how to graduate the tone and the value of the charcoal. And this just gives you an easy way to do it, some easy shapes, and the actual worksheet itself, is blank when you get it, but you can see what the finished one looks like. Kind of gives you an idea of what it would look like after you kind of go through the process. Okay. All right, so let's go over and just look at that little apple one more time. So very simple rounded shape, just some medium values pretty much with a little bit of dark in there. So let me just come back over to my work area, and we'll get started on this. It's funny or interesting, I guess. One of the things that we talk about a lot, in pretty much any painting class that I do, there's always that point where you have to kind of sit down and start working on sketching out whatever it is that you're going to paint. And as having been an instructor for many years, it's kind of common for me to realize, or for me to encounter many students who have not really taken drawing lessons or have not practiced drawing a lot, and but are still interested in painting. And I will tell you that it's definitely good to be interested in painting, but your drawings Your drawing ability is definitely going to come into play the more you paint. For the longer, the longer time that you spend painting, you'll start to become aware more and more that you would really kind of like to sharpen your drawing skills, because you're finding that the caliber of your paintings, the caliber of your work is really heavily depends on how well you can draw in the first place. So that's one of the things I'm focusing on for the whole month of September, is really kind of reinforcing and developing some of these drawing skills. And so as we start working through this, I want you to kind of think about it in those terms, that drawing is really sort of a skeletal structure for your paintings. And so any amount of time that you can spend practicing sketching and drawing, it's going to show up really well in your finished paintings. Okay, all right, so let's work on this little apple. I've got just a blank sheet of drawing paper here, and when I'm practicing, I just sort of use like just a little drawing pad to kind of practice with. And I have taped off my edges just because I kind of like having a white edge. And when I start a charcoal sketch, I always tone my paper. White paper is like the brightest tone that we will have in a drawing. And so when you start a charcoal drawing, because you want to have a nice range of values, always tone your paper so that you kind of start with a medium value. If you've noticed, lots of charcoal paper that you can buy out there, it's colors, it's different colors, or it's a gray or something like that. And so the idea is that you're starting with sort of a medium value. I can even tap this a little bit to release some more of the charcoal. So I just want to get a nice tone of gray onto my paper as a baseline. So this is just sort of a medium, light medium value here. So I kind of want to start with that. And as I look at my apple, let's see if I can get both of them up here at the same time. So as I look at my apple, I'm just using this is like a 2B charcoal pencil. And you can draw with a pencil, you can also draw with one of your vine sticks. In fact, I'm actually a little bit more used to drawing with my little stick. But you're just going to come in here and just kind of sketch with it very lightly, and just like you would with pencil, I'm looking at my apple and I'm just sort of blocking in the shape and kind of trying to pay attention to where everything is, making sure that I'm filling up my space nicely. I still want it to be a good composition, even though it's just sort of a practice drawing. Practicing your composition while practicing your sketching is always a good thing. So I'm just blocking in the shape here, looking for all my little things here, all my little shapes that I'm seeing in the apple. And one of the great things about drawing with charcoal is it's so easy to lift and erase and move around, whereas pencil, the graphite really bites into the paper pretty well and makes it hard to lift off if you need to reposition something or, that type of thing. All right, so this nice little shape here. It's just so fun. Even just, there's sort of a kind of a meditative feeling when you're drawing with charcoal, because it has a very tactile feel against the paper. It gets your hands dirty. It's really different, especially if you're used to working digitally or anything like that. It's really nice to just get back into materials that are touching your hands and maybe getting them dirty just a little bit. All right, so now that I've got my basic shape, I want to kind of just come in here and really start working on establishing some of these values. And this is an opportunity where I kind of like to use some of my powdered charcoal. I've got just a little bit here in my little dish, and I'm just going to use a dry paintbrush, and I'm just actually coming in here. I'm just going to dump some of this out onto my little apple here. And I'm going for some of these really dark values that I see. So I'm just kind of pushing it around. And charcoal is really fun to play with a paintbrush. And as a painter, especially a watercolor painter, it's kind of fun to just work with it in that way, because it kind of just gives you that feel of painting, but it's a dry medium. So it just kind of lets you move some of this stuff around, and you can almost feels like you're practicing painting just a little bit. So I'm just using this to kind of move around some of the powder. And there's going to be a lot of it that's loose and might not actually stick to the paper, and that's okay. You just kind of get rid of that. You can bring your little stick back into it, and I'm going to start building some value. So you just can't get this dark with pencil, and it's just so easy to manipulate and move around, and I really want to pay attention to where it's really, really dark. Just getting those little shapes in there. So I'm just kind of going through, looking for all the darker tones in my little apple here. And I can do some blending. And depending on your paper, you know, if you blend too much, it can kind of lift it all the way off of the page, so you just want to watch that. My favorite surface for drawing with charcoal is actually hot-pressed watercolor paper. It's got a lot of tooth as far as drawing goes, and it really does grab the charcoal and hold it in place. Really a lot of fun to use. Alright, so I want to kind of start paying a little bit more attention to my shape. And there is sort of a little shadow that the apple is casting out on the, you know, the table that it's sitting on. And I'm just about ready to start working on some of my lighter values. But I want to make sure I've got plenty of charcoal out on the paper to work with. And now, just as much as I draw and, you know, contribute to the drawing with the charcoal, the eraser does a lot of work to, you know, to really come into play, to add some nice contrasts. So I'm going to go on the outside of my apple and just lift a little bit and start to develop some nice contrasts from the background to my shape. I've even got some little highlights that I need to lift out on my apple. I can form my little kneaded eraser to whatever shape I want. And I'm just gonna come into my apple and just sort of lift out some of these little shapes that I'm seeing in the highlights. And there's little speckles all over the apple. I can actually just take my kneaded eraser and form it into a little point. Kind of tap a little bit to create a little mottled texture. And it'll get dirty as you go along, so just stretch your eraser and pull up a new little clean spot. There's little striations and specks and all different kinds of little textures happening. Just make sure, especially when you're drawing an apple or any form, that whatever texture you might be adding to your surface, make sure that it's conforming to the shape that you're drawing, else it can get kind of lost. It'll lose its form. Whenever the eraser gets dirty, you know, you just kind of pull it apart. It's sort of self-cleaning in a way. So I'm just kind of go through my little apple here, just picking up a few little specks. Again, if it gets dirty, you can just kind of find a clean spot on your eraser and keep going. Whoops. Alright, so I want to get some darker value in here. So I'm going to reach over here. I've got a really dark valued charcoal pencil here. This one just makes a lot darker mark. You can see it's blacker, you know, than the others. So I'm just going to come in here and start adding a little bit more value. And this one does have the wooden casing on it, so it is easier to kind of hold it and almost let it kind of treat it like a pencil. You can kind of just control the movement of it just a little bit more. So I'm just working through, paying attention to my values, paying attention to my reference photo here. I've got one here that I'm looking at. Got several different little dark areas right down here at the bottom. Really, really a nice shadow under here. And then of course that stem is really dark. Right, it's really dark right as it's coming out of the apple, but it sort of alleviates in value as it gets up to toward the top end there. Let's see, somebody's got someone's saying, yeah, Denise said, do you use an inexpensive brush? I do, absolutely. This is just like a sort of a tack-on brush. I definitely want to, keep that protected. It's not going to, it's not really going to damage the brush too much, but charcoal does contain, acidic compounds, especially once it gets wet. And so I kind of tend to just use inexpensive brushes when I'm working with the charcoal. I had mentioned earlier, using a little blender, this little point lets me kind of get in here and do some fine-tune blending where my finger's a little bit too big to sort of get in there. But I can use this little blender to get in there and really grab the spots that I want. It works out really well. And I can even load up my blender, if I want to. I can kind of, get it stained with some charcoal and go right into my drawing with that too. I'm going to get my regular charcoal. I can tell that the charcoal that I took out of my fireplace, it's just not as dark as the regular charcoal. Just the kind that I got out of my fireplace. It's just not as dark. So I'm just going to use a scratch sheet of paper to sort of, I'm just offloading a little bit of this crushed charcoal just because I know it's a little bit darker. And I'm just going to have it over to the side, almost like a little palette, and so that I can kind of get into that if I need to. And that's going to give me a lot darker value. I can tell that I'm needing it a little bit more in some of these areas. You can still get your fingers in there, and depending on your paper, anytime you're working with charcoal, you sort of get a little bit of dust layer that builds up. And the dust is just an indication that the paper is just not going to hold on to any more of the charcoal. You've exceeded sort of the limitation of the paper. So a paper that's got a nice soft surface with a lot of tooth, a lot of texture to it, is going to really hold on to the charcoal a little bit better for you. Alright, so I'm just kind of working my way around through the apple here. And if I wanted to, I think I might do this. I know that the background of my photo, is completely white, but I want to add a little bit of drama to mine, so I think I'm going to make my background a little bit dark near the bottom and let it gradually get lighter as it goes up. I can just paint this in here, and I'll show you another thing you can do too. The compressed charcoal stick that I mentioned earlier, you can actually get this guy involved, and lay in a lot of dark charcoal quickly. You know, all of these, they're all charcoal, but they each have their own kind of little properties that let you do different things. You can just apply the charcoal in different ways. I can come in with my kneaded eraser. You know, I've got a little bit of light bouncing up from the table, you know, onto the apple, so I can kind of come in here and lift out just a little bit and kind of reestablish some form. Getting rid of that line, that's one of the hardest things in drawing, is to eliminate some of your lines, because there really aren't lines in between objects. It's just two different values coming in contact with one another. I'm going to come over here and just lift out a little bit over here. I'd like to see a little bit of contrast from the background to my apple, and I can just get that by lifting out. It's really a good way to handle it. And you've even got like a white charcoal pencil. It's kind of a misnomer because there's really no white charcoal, but you know, you can use like a white chalk stick, and depending on, you know, which one you use or how dark your drawing is, you can still kind of come in here and add some little whites if you wanted to on top of what you're doing. You know, this kind of gets you into the realm of some pastel work, you know, and you can, you know, depending on the pastels you're using, as long as they're dry, you could start to incorporate color into this with your charcoal. You can do a lot of different things with it. But using charcoal is a wonderful way to start practicing values. It's drawing practice, it's value practice, it's a little bit of everything. It's really a wonderful medium to use, and it's so accessible and so, you know, relatively easy to find, easy to use, and you can really just get some results really quickly right off the bat with it. And that just kind of feels good, you know, to know that you're just accomplishing something right off the bat. And charcoal really gives you that confidence because it's such an easy medium to start working with. And in traditional drawing circles, this will be the medium that you do start with, because it is a lot easier to work with than pencil. All right, so I think I'll wrap this one up. Let me zoom out here, and so kind of let you see what I've got going. So just a little simple exercise, and I did tape it off just because I like the idea of being able to, you know, just like with a painting, you know, pull the tape away and you've got a nice little edge. And if you're doing some charcoal drawings inside a notebook or wherever they are, you do want to make sure that you spray some fixative on these, and I can make some recommendations on that if anybody's got questions on it. Oh, Denise was also asking the darker charcoal pencil that I was using. Let's see, the one that I was using just now. Now this is like you know, this is a Pitt charcoal. This is like a Faber-Castell. This is actually a really old pencil. This one's been around for a little while. This was German made, so it's like a really dark, but they come in 6B and probably darker. I know that in my General's kit I do have like a 6B, and I would say that these are probably going to be about the same value Yeah, these are about the same value. I just kind of tested it over to the side. But 6B is really, really dark, and that's what allowed me to kind of get some of these really dark values, you know, over here on the right-hand side of the drawing. Let me get this tape off. Here we go. All right, but so you can see it's really fun to work with, and I really enjoy working with it a lot more than pencil sometimes, just because it's, I don't know, it's not quite as limiting, and it also gives you a really good chance to practice value and practice, you know, practice sketching at the same time. So both of those are so important when you're working in watercolor. And you know, if you're not used to sketching, sometimes there will, you know, it's really going to impact the type of watercolor that you sort of might work on. So we've all had that experience. You might see something that you're inspired to do, you know, to turn into a watercolor painting, and then immediately the second thought you have is, oh, but I don't know if I could draw that. And so what I want you to think about, you know, is, you know, the importance of being able to start, you know, kind of getting your drawing skills, you know, just start, you know, working on that a little bit, and elevating in that area, spending some time, you know, elevating your drawing skills a little bit, because it's going to immediately transfer into your paintings. And so charcoal is such a perfect medium to use for that, because it allows you the opportunity to have your sketching practice and value practice all at the same time, and with relative ease. Okay, learning to draw with pencil is a little harder than using charcoal. So let me look and see if anybody has got oh, Jill is saying, I'm interested in what you use to set the work. Yes, I use, in fact, let me see if I have it. Oh, I should have brought it out here. I don't. I use a fixative called Lascaux, and it's I think it's Swiss made. It's a little bit expensive. Well, it's a lot expensive. I use it primarily for pastel drawings, because it will not alter any of your colors like many fixatives will. Charcoal, it's a little bit more forgiving. You don't really have color that you're dealing with, but you do have the intensity of your values, and some fixatives can actually saturate your values, making them look darker, and then sometimes they'll actually make your values look a little bit lighter. So, you know, it's good to kind of invest in a good quality fixative. I know some people say, well, just put hairspray on it, and I guess technically you can, but it will yellow, and it really doesn't give you a nice protection, you know, that you need. And especially, you know, if you're going to save charcoal drawings inside of a sketchbook, I do recommend, you know, putting fixative on them for sure, but then you might also want to consider putting little wax sheets in between, little glassine sheets, you know, or something like that, so that they don't smear. Because even with fixative, if you've got like an entire book full, you know, those pages do kind of still move a little bit, and you're going to be transferring, you know, or rubbing that charcoal around, and it's going to, you know, mess up the drawing. So I'll definitely put some information though in wherever in the groups and that type of thing on that fixative that I use. But I hope this was helpful for you and kind of opened your eyes to all the different ways that you can kind of use charcoal. There's all the different ways that you can access it and use it. You can grind it up into powder. It comes in compressed sticks. You can kind of just do a little bit of everything. Super fun to use, and it really is good value practice. So when the video is over, definitely download the little worksheet that I have for you. And it just gives you an opportunity to practice your shapes, practice your values, and just kind of get really familiar with the medium to begin with. And then get your sketchbook out and play with it and sketch and draw and do some other things that you want to. And it really helps set the stage. You know, anything that you want to do like this, if I started doing a watercolor painting now, right after doing this charcoal drawing of the apple, I'm going to have a lot better success when I start painting the apple, because I've already kind of gotten the image in my mind. I've got the values sort of worked out in my mind because I spent time doing it here, and all of that work, all of that practice translates right into my paintings, and it just makes the work better. So I hope this was helpful for you, and for all my members out there. We're going to do a lot of drawing for September, so I look forward to meeting you here for that too. And definitely subscribe, like, comment, all those good things.